I feel like I wasted my teens. 13, 14, 15, 16. I feel like I did nothing. Well, the truth is I did do nothing. I was the shy kid. I was the guy who did nothing. I was the guy who went to school, didn't care about whatever was happening inside of school. I wasn't even there. I would go to school, but I would be somewhere else. I'd be daydreaming. I'd be wondering about what's next. How my life is going to look. How I'm going to do anything. Because always in high school, I always thought that I was going to be a loser. A nobody. Someone who just passes and goes through existence like everybody else. Because something. To exist, you must have an end point. In the moment you decide to start something, it's also the same moment you decide to end it. Life is like a bunch of chapters. And your teen years are I'm just going to say it, a short chapter. Okay? Think about it right now. The age, I don't care how old you think you are. The age that you are right now is the youngest and the oldest paused in time that you will ever be. And in fact, today is the only day that you will ever get to experience. Because it will only ever be right now. But don't take it for granted. Not like me. I remember everything. I remember the stupid little fights. The staying up until 3 a.m. playing video games. But as you get older, you realize that time is different. Not that it's different, not that it's changed, because it's always been the same 24 hours. But the way you look at it, you're more aware. The seconds, they kind of turn into years. And the minutes, they turn into hours. The hours turn into seconds. Time is all screwy as you age, because your book opens more. When you're 17, you only have 17 years of life. But when you're 27, that's 27 years of life. It might sound like I'm just spitting stupid, but just your life is longer. So a memory that happened when you were 8 years old when you're 27 is going to seem a lot further back than when you were 17. After a while, you're not going to remember what you had for dinner a week ago. But it might be easier to remember when you were a kid. Because the days seem longer as life gets shorter. And that's the unfortunate reality. That you only get one chance, one opportunity to go out there. And if you waste your teen years, or waste your adult years, waste your 20s, your 30s, because you can waste your entire life. In fact, every single person in this world dies. But not everyone lives. And how I decided to spend my years was I just went home and I like I said, I didn't care. I didn't care about myself. I didn't care about my grades. I didn't care about the upcoming tests. If it wasn't for COVID-19, I would have probably actually failed freshman year. I didn't care so much in freshman year that my Spanish teacher almost failed me. In fact, I did fail. I got an F, I think, in the second quarter. But then I got an A and an A because obviously you moved to online. And then 10th grade I was online. 11th grade I was online. And then I came back as a senior. That was weird. I don't know if anyone can relate to that. Going from freshman year. And then I came back as a senior. It was kind of insane stuff. And when I came back as a senior, I thought everything was going to be different. I thought I wasn't going to be the kid who got laughed at. I thought I wasn't going to be the quiet kid anymore. I thought I was going to have friends. I thought I was going to do things that I never did. Go invited to parties and all that different stuff. But it was the same. In fact, it was so much of the same that things were actually not bad. They were not bad. Because I was used to it. Guys, here's the thing in life. Loser in primary school, loser in middle school, loser in high school. You think things are going to change after you graduate. But you just haven't lived your life long enough to see that same cycle play out over and over again. Loser in college, loser in the workforce. Break that cycle, because your life is exactly what you make it out to be. You know, if you believe you're a loser, if you believe you're worthless, if you believe you can't do anything right, then that will be your reality. Because in every action, in every vocal cord string that you produce, sound, you are going to try to self-destruct yourself, self-sabotage yourself. In every instance, you have the chance to, because you're reinforcing your mind. You're reinforcing those bad habits. But that's okay. You know, because one day you look back, you know, when you realize that after you graduate, you only talk to the people that you really want to. And after you graduate, you realize that everyone becomes dead. And not that everyone dies, but just you enter free roam. And you could talk to whoever you want, you could do whatever you want, but 89% of it will be spent at your parents' house, either in their basement or their attic. Or maybe you have your own bedroom. Maybe you're lucky enough to have your own bedroom. Most aren't. You know, but all I'm trying to say is, if I could go back, which I would not like to, because teens were hard, you know, going through changes, puberty, asshole hair, thinking you're a loser. I'm pretty sure every young person just thinks that they're a loser, but after a while you grow up and you realize that it doesn't need to make sense to anybody. It doesn't need to make sense to anybody except you. You know, and you are the only person that you ever had to improve. You know, because throughout your life, you're always trying to prove yourself. You think attention is love. That is why you suffer so much. And it's hard to see. It's hard to do. You know, I believe it was 11th grade. I got my first girlfriend. My first ever girlfriend. I never thought I would get one. You know, that was the whole thing in my life. You know, I never thought I would have someone who truly loved me for me. You know, but then I found her. And everything changed. You know, I was so happy. You know, I found that light. You know, it was back. You know, that light that I had once as a kid, it was back. The world turned from black and white back to brightness. But it faded as quickly as it came. Because you realize you never meet the same person twice, even if it's the same person. And if you put your foot into a river, you will never touch the same water twice. It's just not how it works. You know, and allow me to really say that again. You will never meet the same person twice, even if it is the same person. Because you guys are constantly changing. You know, throughout high school, you'll probably grow apart from some of your relationships. Maybe you'll grow together. Perhaps it won't matter. You will be the one that does. You know, because at the end of the day, it's not about carrying the things that were never meant for you forever. Because at a certain point, you need to put down the trauma. You need to put down the past. Because it just doesn't matter anymore. You know, not because you're weak, not because it's too heavy, not because what happened to you didn't matter. Because you do. Because sometimes in life you need to put down the things that you were never meant to hold forever. You know, lessons that were just meant to change you. You know, people that come into your life that teach you a lesson. You know, so most people you do not keep in your life forever. Most relationships fade out, and that is okay. Because that's just life. You know, everybody, there's really only two people that you need to make proud in this life. It's not your parents, not your grandparents, it's not your neighbor, not your friends. Gee, it's not even you, present day. No. It's that 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old who dreamed, who wanted something more. It's that 60, 70, 80-year-old self that looks back at you right now, if you're privileged enough to make it that far. Because you should not fear getting older, as it is a privilege denied to far too many people. You know, to age another day, to see another day. It's a blessing. It's a miracle. Whether we believe it or not. You know, if you could just slow down and take out one puzzle piece by one puzzle piece. Unlike I. Maybe you could start to shape something for yourself. You know, because when you're younger, you think you need to become somebody. But the truth is, you already are somebody. You are you. And there will never be another you. Ever. And maybe that's the greatest part. The most unique. That you get to be the story. And don't let those teen years stress you out like I did. You know, because every waking moment felt like death, but in reality, after you graduate and everybody goes off and does their own thing, you realize that it all didn't matter that much. Not the Keystones, not the PSSAs, not any of the crazy tests that you have to take, SATs. I mean, yes, they mattered. You know, of course, if you took that route. But you realize the stress of everything. You know, the drama. You know, as you get older, you realize there's still gossip. There's still drama. There's still a right and a wrong. You know, this whole grown-up world. It still has it has everything that the kid world had. Because as you get older, you also realize another thing, that these adults are just children pretending to be not. You know, because nobody on this earth is ready for the age in which they will become. Nobody's ready for tomorrow. But you get up and you do it anyway. You know, you realize that in life, not everybody is going to like you, but you will approach them anyway. Not every situation is going to turn out your way, but you do it anyway. You know, because when you fail in this life, you try and you try again. You know, perhaps I didn't actually waste my teen years. Perhaps I didn't waste anything at all. Perhaps I just learned. You know, perhaps it's all looking back and thinking the good old days, the good old days. You know, maybe we should forget our past. Forget our future. And focus on today. Because it wouldn't be the good old days. Gee. It would just be a good day. And always remember the quote, everybody, that my Nana tells me. Today is a good day to have a good day. And you're never getting today back. So go out there and be young, dumb, and broke. Make stupid decisions. Make mistakes. Realize they make you who you are. Do not run from your past. Because what you are running from in this life has already caught up to you. What you need to do is you need to rip out the hooks that bind you. And eventually, if you move forward and you put down what's not meant for you, even though it's hard, you know, the ripping your pants, the failing classes, the people laughing, the girlfriend that destroyed you. As hard as it is to put it all down, you need to put it all down. You need to put it all down. You need to let go of your past so you could have a future. Thank you guys for watching this video. I'm not too sure really why I decided to make a video about me wasting my teen years, but I just feel like it's the truth. You know, and you can never get those back. You can never go back and reopen that door. You know, time is kind of like it's like a one-stop shop. Once today is over, it's over. Once this moment is over, it's over. Once this video is over, it's over. Enjoy your life. Okay, make every single moment count. All of it. Everything. You know, because one day you will look back and you will realize, wow, you only got to do high school once. You only got to be a teenager once. And there's no getting it back. Stay positive. Enjoy your day. And stay tuned, because I got things cooking up. Catch you guys next time.